My family flew to Costa Rica and left me home to be responsible. They handed me the house keys like I was their servant, but what they didn't know was that I had a one-way first-class ticket to Tokyo waiting, and I was never coming back. I'm 32, watched them board their flight to Costa Rica, while they thought I was heading home to take care of their plants. As I stood there, I felt my dad's hand on my sister's shoulder, that familiar weight of approval I had been chasing for 3 decades. He encouraged her to enjoy every moment. The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Then he looked at me with that familiar gaze, the one that said I was the responsible one, the one who stayed home while they got to have fun. My mom handed me the house key without making eye contact, reminding me to take care of the plants, check the mail, and make sure everything was in order for their return. My sister gave me a cheeky grin from behind them, her fancy luggage tags shimmering under the bright lights. She didn't need to say a word. We both understood our roles in the family. I nodded, smiled, and wished them an awesome trip, watching them disappear through security. Their laughter floated back to me as they joked about sipping drinks on the beach and ziplining through the rainforest. This was the trip they'd been dreaming about for months, one they brought up at every family dinner. They thought I was too busy to join them, as someone needed to hold down the fort. What they didn't know was I had my own ticket, first class, one way to Tokyo. I waited about 20 minutes after they cleared security, then made my way to the other end of the terminal. My carry-on felt light compared to the burden I had been carrying for years. Inside, I had everything I truly needed. The rest I had either shipped ahead or sold off. I had just finished clearing out my apartment, and my resignation letter had been sitting on my boss's desk for a couple of weeks. My phone had shrunk down to just 7 contacts, none of whom were family. When the gate agent scanned my ticket and smiled, it felt like the first genuine human interaction I'd had in ages. I took my seat, enjoyed the champagne they offered me, and watched as another plane rolled away from the gate. I found myself wondering if that plane belonged to someone I knew, if they had figured out yet that I wasn't answering my phone. It would take them a while. I had set up auto-responses and scheduled texts to go out at intervals. By the time they landed in Costa Rica and settled into their resort, they'd probably assume I was dutifully checking on their empty house, like the good son they always thought I was. The reality? It was way more complicated than they ever bothered to understand. This all started 18 months ago when my grandfather passed away. He was the only one in the family who really got me, who actually asked what I wanted rather than what I could do for everyone else. He left me some money, not a huge amount but enough to change my life. The will stated it was for me and me alone, for my future and my dreams. When my parents found out, they lost it. They expected the inheritance to be split evenly or, better yet, tossed into the family fund to support my sister's business attempts or their retirement plans. I said no. I can't remember a time before that when I had stood up to them. My sister called me selfish, my mom cried about family loyalty, and my dad just went quiet with that disappointed look that always made me back down. But this time I held my ground. I put the money into accounts they couldn't touch. That was when I started to plan. My sister had always been the golden child. She flunked out of 2 colleges, started 3 businesses that our parents funded, all of which crashed and burned, and now she was consulting, basically just posting on social media and begging for loans she never paid back. At 34, she hadn't held a job for longer than 6 months. Our parents called her entrepreneurial and free-spirited. In contrast, I started working at 16 and put myself through college while living at home to save cash, which meant I was the handyman and the occasional ATM. I built a solid career in software development, saved like crazy, and kept my head down. Our parents called me responsible and dependable, but I eventually realized they were just being kind. Really, it meant I was convenient. The trip to Costa Rica was framed as a family vacation. They brought it up at Christmas. Everyone was going. They insisted it would be good for us to spend some time together. The cost per person was pretty high, but they kept insisting that I could swing it since I had that inheritance money just sitting around. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the pressure to agree, not just for myself, but probably to cover my sister's share too, especially since her consulting business wasn't doing so hot this quarter. I'd start to say yes, slipping into the routine we've had for the last 32 years. But then my dad chimed in about how I never did anything interesting, suggesting that I wouldn't know what else to spend my money on. My mom laughed and even backed him up, saying at least this way, I'd finally get to go somewhere. My sister rolled her eyes, claiming my life was dull. That's when it dawned on me. They didn't genuinely want me there. They were after my wallet. They wanted the illusion of family togetherness. Someone to snap their photos, lug their bags, and ensure everything was booked. They weren't interested in the real me. They just wanted the version of me that catered to their needs. I forced a smile and said I'd think about it. But over the next few weeks, I really did ponder it all. I recalled every moment from my childhood where my accomplishments were overlooked, while my sister got praised for her blunders. Every holiday where I handled all the cooking and cleaning, while she strolled in late and bolted early. All those times I lent her money that never came back or fixed messes I didn't create, all while swallowing my own needs to keep the peace. I remembered my grandfather's words just 2 months before he passed, about living for myself. He said family mattered, but not when it drained you inside. That the money he was leaving me was more than just cash. It was a pass to stop being what they needed and start being who I wanted to be. So I started making my own plans. Tokyo had been my dream since I was 12. I taught myself Japanese through apps and online courses. I worked remotely for a tech company with offices in Asia, quietly building connections and opportunities. When I inquired about a transfer, they were excited. They needed talented developers who spoke Japanese and understood American business culture. And they offered me a role that would start in 3 months. That gave me the time I needed to break free from every obligation and expectation my family had placed on me. I helped my sister with one last crisis, co-signed my parents' refinancing paperwork so they could head to Costa Rica, and made sure everything was settled. I played my part perfectly one last time, then kept my plans to myself. When Costa Rica came up again at dinner 6 weeks ago, I said I couldn't afford it. My mom scoffed, pointing out that I clearly had money since I just bought a new laptop. My sister jumped in with a snarky remark about my priorities, while my dad lectured me on how family should come first. I apologized and explained that I needed to be smart with my money. They were annoyed but not surprised. Of course, I was too boring and cheap to join them on their adventure. They never asked what I was doing with my money or my time, too wrapped up in their excitement to notice I was already saying goodbye. The night before they left, they called me over for dinner. That's when they asked me to house sit, to take care of things while they were gone. My sister had left some boxes for me, my mom handed over a long list of tasks, and my dad wanted me to sort out some paperwork. They expected 2 weeks of my life dedicated to their needs while they lounged on the beach. I agreed to everything, took the key, wrote down the instructions, hugged them goodbye, and told them I'd see them when they returned. As the plane engines roared to life, I stared at the house key in my hand and dropped it into the seat pocket in front of me. Someone might find it someday or not, but honestly, I didn't care anymore. My phone buzzed with the first automated text I'd set up, letting my parents know I was home safe and settling in. The next message would confirm I'd checked the house, and the day after that, I'd casually mention watering the plants. I spaced those texts out just right, keeping up the illusion that I was exactly where they thought I was. By the time they figured out the truth, I'd be 9 time zones away. When the flight attendant asked if I needed anything, I ordered another glass of champagne, finally allowing myself to feel something I hadn't in years. A sense of lightness. Not happiness just yet, but a space where it might grow, a relief from the weight pressing down. 14 hours to Tokyo ahead of me, then a new apartment I'd already secured, a job starting in 2 weeks, and a life that was entirely my own. I'd studied the neighborhood I'd be living in, practiced the routes, and imagined mornings in cozy coffee shops, and evenings wandering through the city. I had learned to be alone with myself, discovering who I was outside of what they needed me to be. The plane took off, and I watched my old life shrink beneath me. Somewhere down there, my family was boarding their own flight, completely unaware that the person they had taken for granted had already left. They would call eventually, be angry, demand explanations, and try guilt and manipulation, just like they had for 3 decades. But I wouldn't be there to hear it. I disabled my old number the moment I landed. My email would bounce back. I had deleted my social media weeks ago. I left them a letter, sitting in their mailbox, arriving 2 days after they returned from Costa Rica. Just long enough for them to panic when I didn't respond, to realize I was really gone. The letter was short. I rewrote it a dozen times, trying to explain everything, to make them understand. But in the end, I kept it simple. I told them I needed to live my own life, thanked them for raising me, wished them well, and didn't include a forwarding address or any information about Tokyo or my plans. They didn't need to know. They didn't deserve to know. This wasn't about punishing them. It was about freeing myself. But maybe if they felt punished by my absence, that said something about what my presence had really meant to them. Update 1. I'm writing this from my apartment in Shibuya 3 weeks after that flight. The first few days were as disorienting as I expected. The jet lag was brutal, and the language barrier was very real despite my preparation. There were definitely moments of doubt, but even then, I never thought once about going back. My family figured it out on day 4 of their Costa Rica trip. I know because my old email address, which I kept active but stopped checking, started filling up with frantic messages. I glanced through them, the progression from confusion to anger to desperation. My mom's subject lines told the story, "Where are you?" to "This isn't funny," to "Please call us." My sister's messages were more direct. She apparently drove to my apartment after they returned early, only to find new tenants moving in. The landlord told her I had fulfilled my lease and provided no forwarding info. She even tried to file a missing person report, but the police found my trail quickly. Employment records showing an international transfer, bank records indicating planned transactions, no signs of foul play. I wasn't missing. I was just gone. There's a difference. My dad took a different route. His messages were calm and measured, discussing responsibility and family obligations. He reminded me about the paperwork I supposedly agreed to handle, the tasks I promised to complete. He didn't express any concern for my well-being. Rather, he framed it as being inconvenienced by my absence. I read them all once, felt that old guilt trying to resurface, and then let it go. I didn't respond. I had said everything I needed in that letter, and if they didn't understand, no amount of additional conversation would help. Work started, and it was challenging in the best way possible. My colleagues were welcoming but professional. Nobody knew my history, and no one had expectations of who I should be. I could just exist as myself and figure out what that even meant. I made mistakes, got lost on the train system, accidentally ordered wrong at restaurants. I had moments of crushing loneliness, missing having someone to call, only to remember that I had never really had that anyway. But I also experienced pure joy, watching the sunrise from my apartment window, successfully navigating a conversation in Japanese, stumbling upon a small bookstore that stayed open late, making a colleague laugh, or cooking dinner for myself in my tiny kitchen. These were simple things that belonged entirely to me. My neighbor, an elderly woman who spoke almost no English, started leaving small packages of homemade pickles outside my door. I tried to thank her properly, fumbling through my rehearsed Japanese, and she just smiled and patted my arm, giving me more genuine affection than I'd received from my family in years. 3 weeks in, a friend of my mother somehow traced my company's main number and tried to reach me through work. My boss asked about it, clearly concerned there was some emergency. I explained carefully that I was estranged from my family and would prefer not to be contacted through work. He nodded and said he'd handle it. The calls stopped. That night, I sent a brief email to my parents' address. I told them I was safe, I was employed, and I needed space. I asked them not to contact me or try to find me. I mentioned that maybe someday we could have a relationship, but it would have to be different, mutual. They would need to see me as a person and not just as a resource. I didn't expect a satisfying response, and I didn't get one. My mom replied immediately with a long message about how hurt they were. How could I do this? What would people think? Didn't I care about family? My sister called me selfish and cruel. My dad kept it brief, saying I'd regret this decision and that the door would remain open, but I would need to apologize. An apology for leaving, for choosing myself, for refusing to burn myself out for their sake. I didn't respond. I archived the emails and went back to building my life. Update 2. 6 months in Tokyo, and I barely recognized the person I was. I found a rhythm, a version of life that fits me better than I knew was possible. The job is going well enough that they've already talked about extending my contract. I've made friends, real friends, who invite me to things because they enjoy my company, not because they need something from me. The guilt has faded to something manageable. Sure, I still wonder if I was too harsh, if I should have tried harder to explain, but then I remember that moment in the airport, watching them laugh as they handed me the house key. And I know I made the right choice. My sister got married last month. I found out because she sent an invitation through my company's HR department after somehow discovering where I was working. The invitation included a note about how hurt she was that I'd missed so many family milestones, that my silence was destroying our mother, and how I should at least show up for her wedding. Of course, it was a destination wedding in Santorini. I stared at the invitation for a long while, at the expensive cardstock and elegant calligraphy, wondering who paid for it. I suspected it was probably our parents and felt only a distant sadness, not for missing the wedding, but for the relationship we never truly had beneath all the dysfunction. I didn't RSVP or send a gift. Instead, I made a donation to a charity that helps young people achieve independence from abusive family situations. It felt more honest than pretending we had the kind of relationship where my presence at her wedding would mean anything real. Through a former colleague who still had connections to my old life, I heard the wedding went well. I also learned I had become the family story, the cautionary tale, the ungrateful son who abandoned everyone. Apparently, my mom told people I'd had a breakdown, my sister claimed I stole money from them, and my dad said I'd always been difficult. None of it was true, but I understood they needed a narrative that made sense to them, one where they weren't the problem. Let them have it. I was busy building something better than their approval. I started dating someone, a woman I met through a hiking group. She's Japanese American and moved to Tokyo for similar reasons, understanding what it means to create distance from a family that can't see you clearly. We're taking our time, both of us careful with our healing hearts. She doesn't push me to reconcile with my family, nor does she suggest that blood should override boundaries. She simply accepts me for who I am, building the life I need. My apartment has character now. I've collected art from local markets, found furniture that fits my taste instead of just being practical. I've learned how to cook Japanese food, sometimes successfully. I joined a gym, started rock climbing, and picked up photography as a hobby. Little things that people with normal lives probably take for granted but feel revolutionary to me. I even started therapy. My company's health insurance covers it, and I found a therapist who specializes in family estrangement and cultural transition. She's helped me understand that what I experienced wasn't just taking for granted. It was a pattern of emotional manipulation and exploitation I had normalized because it was all I knew. Once, she asked me what I would say to my younger self, the one who spent decades trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I thought for a long time before replying that I'd tell him he was enough, that he didn't need to earn his place, and that leaving wasn't failure. Sometimes it was the only way to survive.